Hello and welcome to Ticket Manager's All Access interview series, engaging leaders from across the sports marketing spectrum to identify and explore critical issues in the business of sports, entertainment, hospitality, sponsorship, ticketing, and even more. I'm your host, Jim Andrews, and joining me on this episode is Mike Falconer, Vice President of Strategy for Sportradar. Mike, welcome. It's a real pleasure to have you join us.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Great to be here.
Excellent. My first question should be to you, are you actually a Falconer or is that just in name only?
Well, I think some years ago, perhaps, we did trace our family back to Aberdeenshire in the early 18th century, actually. So I would imagine there might have been a bit of falconry back in those days, but certainly a practice that's ended within the family, as far as I know, anyway.
Well, there we go. Too bad. I think it's fascinating, but we won't talk about falconry today. We'll talk about some more interesting stuff for our listeners, I'm sure. And let's just start off because Sportradar is one of those organizations where if you asked 5 different people what you did, I think you'd get 5 different answers because you're involved in so many aspects of sports technology. So would you mind starting us off just with a little bit of a brief overview of Sportradar and on the kind of component businesses that you're in?
Yes, I mean, you're right. Sportradar is a significant, sizable business now. We do work in a number of different areas. I mean, we refer to ourselves as the world's leading sports technology company, and I think that's broadly safe for us to say as far as the scale and the range of products and services that we provide across the sports ecosystem. I mean, we are a 23-year-old business founded by a man called Carsten Curl back in around early 2000s, and we're now a public business. So we IPO'd on the NASDAQ in 2021, and I think there was a culmination of over 20 years of significant growth, significant expansion from our provenance in sports betting into a business now that is at a very central position within the sports ecosystem. We have numbers of different customers in all of the various constituencies. So we work with number of significant rights holders from MLB, NBA, NHL, UEFA, AFC, media owners from ESPN to OneFootball to a whole bunch of media businesses across the world. We work with just about every sports betting operator that exists in some way, shape, or form, from FanDuel or DraftKings in the UK, in the US, Bet365 globally, and a number of other major sports betting operators around the world. And we work with technology companies. So we count Google, Apple, Meta within our customer base. So the range of products and service now, all based around data and technology, is broad, so that we can really provide what the industry needs across a whole range of customer groups.
That would certainly give us a lot to discuss, but I'd really like to focus on something new for Sportradar, and that's FanID, which is a new solution that you recently launched in the fan engagement space. So maybe there we just start with an explanation of what FanID is meant to do and a little bit about the process that it entails, and then we can dig a little bit deeper into some of the details there, because obviously fan engagement, fan data, and insights is such an important topic these days.
It is, Jim. You're right, and thanks for asking, because it's this has been a major initiative for us for over 2 years now. We recognized that the digital landscape was changing, so we started to make significant investments in people and technology some time ago so that we could now bring a product to market that we think is future-proof and we think answers a number of the challenges, but also I think provides opportunity, but based on the way the digital universe will work. And by that, I mean, a couple of seismic changes as context, really. The first is the way the world now sees privacy. There's a different view on individual privacy, I guess, initiated at the very start by GDPR and, the European Union deciding that, okay, privacy isn't respected fully. Changes need to be made to the way digital practice, takes place, so that individuals' privacy rights are respected wherever they engage. And so that has been going on for a period of time, as I'm sure you're aware. This shift, as we talk about it, from third-party to first-party cookies amongst all the major browsers. So Safari and Firefox a couple of years ago decided to deprecate third-party cookies, because they are trackers, third-party, pieces of code basically that observe your browsing behavior, if you like, without perhaps you knowing about it. So GDPR decided, okay, look, if we are going to observe people in terms of their digital practice, then we need to give consent. And that's essentially what first parties cookies are there to do. It's to track behavior on a much more consensual, much more known basis, where the value exchange between individual and platform they're visiting is understood, and their rights are respected. So that structural change, if you like, I guess, forced a change in perspective and philosophy around data sharing. So if you look outside at sport, in retail or in media, already there are lots of examples of what might have been historically competitive businesses for mutual benefit starting to collaborate around data, because it's in all of their interest to do so. And so as the need arose, then the technology was developed in order to facilitate it. So you will have heard of new platform technologies called data clean rooms, which are environments where first-party data can be shared and connected whilst observing and complying with all of the new privacy regulation that surrounds it. So that seismic shift in terms of regulation, that seismic shift in terms of people's philosophy towards data sharing, we saw as a significant opportunity for the sports ecosystem, and in particular for the relationship between rights holders, so federations, leagues, teams, players even, and their commercial partners, because there was an obvious opportunity through this data clean room technology, to facilitate a effective exchange of data, whereby significant material benefits to both parties where that first party data is shared. So having kind of observed this shift, having spent some time doing our diligence really around what kind of platform should we or could we bring to market, we started, as I say, making investments a couple of years ago. So, you wind that forward to now. And so we've brought to market, as you mentioned, what we believe to be, and I think it would be difficult to dispute, is the world's first sports-specific first-party data marketing activation platform, basically. So it is designed and dedicated specifically for the sports industry, and it really has four principal components, I think, to try and break it down into its key features. And they are data collection, data connection, data activation, and data orchestration. So we think by providing technologies that can operate at scale and that can satisfy those four demands, we think we're bringing something valuable, innovative, future-proof to market. And just to give a little more detail on each. So collection, of course, is lots of rights owners and brands for that matter, will sit on significant first-party data sets. They're always interested in scaling that, but they're also interested in deepening that. So having an identity of somebody is a useful thing when it's been given consensually, but understanding their preference and intent and what they like, what teams they support in simple terms in the sports ecosystem is, of course, very useful. So when we talk about collection, it's both increasing the scale of a data set, but also increasing the depth of a data set. And that's really the first pillar. So it provides that value asset, if you like, particularly for the rights owner in the first place. Then, of course, second question is, okay, we're sitting on this data set, how do we connect? And this is really where our clean room, our sports-specific data clean room comes into play. And that's to an extent where the magic happens, because we have deliberately built it as best in breed, best in class. It sits on confidential computing, which is really the most progressive end of clean room technology. It is what we call multi-party, so almost limitless number of participants in the clean room. So a league or a team, all of their commercial partners, and a range of other interests that might surround them as a rights holder, all of them can participate within the clean room. And it provides the connective tissue between the respective first-party data set. So, and that is, of course, crucial. It's privacy safe. so everybody can participate without any concerns over their data sovereignty, and they can set their own rules in terms of the extent to which they want to share and the occasions on which they want to share. So it's flexible, safe, and a very important part of the FanID platform proposition. Now, of course, the third element, though, is just as crucial, because having data is one thing and having identity is one thing. But if you can't find these individuals in the wider digital domain, then, of course, its value diminishes pretty quickly. So what we've also done is built technology and developed relationships with a number of what we call identity networks, whereby that individual that you might have collected the identity around, then shared within the clean room, you can then, on an entirely consensual first-party basis, you can engage that individual based on the preferences and the intents and the behavioral insight you have around them. So it facilitates very personalized, relevant engagement, which, of course, is kind of good for everybody. Good for the fan, good for the advertising brand, and good for the rights holder, because they're improving their fans' experience. So that combination of collection, connection, and activation provide really the three critical pillars for the platform. We do then have a binding layer, as we refer to it, and that fourth label I refer to of orchestration. So and what that, of course, when you're operating at scale, so if you take a significant league, they will have numerous commercial partners, all of whom are trying to, of course, engage their fan base. That's why they've paid rights fees, because they want the reflected glory of the sport, and they want to be seen as relevant and having purpose, within that sport that they've chosen to associate with. So when you have a lot of people trying to do the same thing, of course, that needs some decision making, and when you do a lot of them, you can't do that on a human basis. So we've built what we call a next best action model, if you like, that on the basis of all of the inputs and considerations that those sponsors and rights holders might want to make, we will organize the engagement so it is thoughtful, it's fair, it respects the fan experience, and it reflects what we refer to as responsible data custodianship, which in the way we now see privacy around the world is a critical and important component. This is not about exploiting fans in any way. It's about being, respecting their privacy rights and ensuring that when you do engage them, you're doing so in a way that is consensual and compliant.
The first thing that it definitely intrigues me, and certainly listeners to this podcast are going to go, okay, here he goes again. They've heard this song from me a number of times. Is the idea of sports rights holders collecting and connecting their first party data is not necessarily new.
Indeed.
You and I have been around the space for a long time, but I have argued for a long time again that even though we've been thinking about it and paying lip service to it, and some have done it very well, most sports organizations, and I think most people that I've talked to have agreed, are not as advanced, have not done everything they could have as compared to, as you were talking about retail and other segments. So it does sound like, hopefully the impending cookieless world that we're looking at in terms of third parties may be, something that spurs folks into action who maybe haven't been or have been lagging a little bit. So I'm glad to hear, the impetus behind that, and obviously why Sportradar has decided to go into this business, seeing that there's a lot of need for this. I think that in terms of those four pillars that you just laid out, obviously, as you said, they're all critical. One does not exist without the other. But let's talk a little bit more about that last piece, because to me, at least, not being as immersed in this world as you are, it's probably the one that I've thought the least amount of, and that is the orchestration. You've got all of these multiple partners going in, and the first like, oh, of course, every partner should have the ability to leverage this data and the insights and do some great personalized marketing. talk to me a little bit more about how that works, because when I first hear about it, I'm like, well, is the process then eliminating some of the ability of the rights holder or the partnership folks to say, well, here's what we're promising you, or here's how we're going to work with you. You just talk to me a little bit more. How does it resolve, kind of like if there are conflicts in timing, if you've
Mhm.
got two partners who want to do something at the same time, who gets to choose who does what when, I guess.
It has been very interesting to think through, what those decisioning considerations are, because we are building something new here. But the two, I guess, underlying questions or issues, if you like, that we observed very early on, because you're right that the notion of first party data being important and useful is businesses have a long way into that transition. And equally, of course, rights holders seeing the value of their first party data is nothing new either. What, though, we observed is that when you activate against that first party data, that is where the kind of baton was being dropped, if you like, and two things were happening. One was that these collective sponsors were activating in silos. So, you would have one sponsor doing their own thing, another sponsor doing their own thing. And of course, that created a sort of chaotic environment because there was no supervision, there was no control over what was happening there. So that in itself, I think, is bad for the fan experience, first of all, because there's no arbiter really in terms of, there's no one looking out for the fan and their experience, across the piece. The other thing, though, that was happening, which was, I think, more of a worry to brands, is that we were pushing each other's prices up, because you'd find that one sponsor was bidding against another sponsor to engage the same fan, which, of course, is counterproductive, and I'm sure not really what the only winner there was the media owner, if you like, and so those are the two thoughts in our mind was, okay, how can we create an environment where there is fairness? And of course, different sponsors have different status. So how fairness and status are considered and respected, but at the same time, where we can eliminate this sort of internal competition that was existing. And of course, at the same time, making sure that the fan experience is curated, because ultimately, I think if you compromise the fan experience, then there are no winners, neither the rights holder or the sponsor themselves. So they were the driving forces, those considerations. So you're right, the next best action model, and of course it's learning all the time and it will get better, as the platform matures. But those are the considerations it takes really is, okay, we have a moment, we have a collection of sponsors, we have a preference, we have some intent. With those considerations, what is the best message to serve from whom at that particular moment? And that is what the decisioning engine does. So, but of course, it already understands status, sponsor objectives, if you like, campaign objectives. So it can operate, across all of those considerations, so that the machine at the end of the day will decide, okay, it's their turn at this moment. We think this is the best message to send to the fan, all things considered. And I think so long as you are conscious and considerate of or able to be conscious and considerate at scale of all of those many inputs and factors, then, to be able to serve that right message that has relevance, purpose, and is additive to the fan experience, that's the environment we want to create. And I think our view, at least, and certainly the sponsors and the right sources we've spoken to, is that can only be a good thing.
I mean, it makes sense to have something that organizes all of that. And I'm going to assume that at the end of the day, too, there's still a human who's overseeing all of this. If on the customer side, if we know this is a relationship business, and we know there are times when you have to do something for a certain sponsor because you're making good on something that didn't happen. I'm assuming that there are still ways for somebody to say, hey, we have to do something we wouldn't ordinarily do because we're in an extraordinary.
Indeed, if someone's bought the home run spot, and someone smashes it out of the park, then of course the machine will know that, and that will be the key input in those situations. So but it is, and to your point though, you're right. Certainly there are humans involved, but because as we tend to Sportradar, the products and services and platforms we build with scale in mind. So we do invest in AI or the necessary AI and machine learning that can, at a automated level in real time make those necessary decisions. And I think that's where 23 years of history in terms of building products and services like this, it really comes into play.
Right. When we talk about this, the connection between rights holders and partners, lots to that relationship, as I was just alluding to. But one of the things that I'm seeing is, and thank goodness, is the initial conversations, whether it's in a sales process or renewal process. I think the brand partners are getting a lot more sophisticated about asking questions, on a number of topics, whether it's sustainability, DEI, and in this case, how data driven are you? From your perspective, are there certain good questions that brands should be asking of their rights holder partners to kind of make sure that, hey, this is an organization that can deliver on the promise of all of this first party data?
I think so, Jim, for sure. And again, back to what we were talking about earlier, these conversations have started, and that was one of our observations was that, quite rightly, sponsors, given the ticket prices they're paying for association, and because they themselves have recognized the opportunity, they are demanding more in and around access to first party data. So, and that will only continue, I'm sure. But the good news, I think, for rights holders is that where that can be satisfied, then brands are willing to pay for that, because in a first party world, which we're now in, brands recognize the value add of relevant, timely messaging. I mean, McKinsey have put out a couple of reports quite recently trying to put a number on, the material value that personalization can bring, and I think the last one topped out at about couple of $1 trillion, of which some of that has already started to be realized. So I think rights holders can see. I think what we try and advocate is that they see as certainly the more mature ones do already, they see their first party data set as a value asset, basically, and they invest in it as a value asset. So, and that involves really two things. One is preparedness, if you like, so looking after that value asset like you'd look after your stadium or any other value asset that you have at your disposal. So, and there's lots of things, of course, that rights holders can do to organize their data, the data they collect, and just simple data hygiene, really, in terms of making sure that value asset is as strong and as scaled and as deep and all the things that I talked about earlier as it can be. And I think that requires investment in people and recognizing that, look, this is an asset we can monetize that will benefit the fan experience, so it deserves focus, priority, and attention. So that's I guess the first thing. What we would also, of course, say self-servingly is that you then need some technology to kind of deploy that data, to take it to market, so to speak. And in the way we see the world, that requires two things. One is that connected platform. So we're not always saying come to Sportradar and use ours, but that's deliberately why we built that, to provide this platform for rights holders as the basis on which they can start to collaborate and share and connect. So if it isn't us, that they ought to be thinking about, okay, how can they do that? And at the same time, of course, recognize that not all data clean rooms are the same, and I think that's going to become a sort of emerging question and issue. We talk about data clean rooms as a sort of generic technology at the moment. Which is certainly true. Probably a couple of years ago, we're now moving into that second phase where there are different sort of clean rooms. Clean rooms have different capabilities, and some don't provide the means to do perhaps what their sponsors will want to. So take that technology questions seriously. It is certainly the first or the second piece of advice. Do your diligence and make sure you're using a platform, I would say, such as ours, but in any event, that needs to be a diligent consideration. And then, of course, thirdly, back to it, that orchestration/activation question is also vital. Try and find ways to exert some control over how that data is deployed or activated, because that's just as important. Don't abdicate responsibility for your data once it's come out of your clean room. Make sure that you can access technology that can organize it, that can give you a level of control. And also, I think that your brand sponsors, can collaborate themselves around best practice and measurements and a whole range of other things. So I think it is, it's seeing the first-party data opportunity as multifaceted, if you like, including really all the things that we've tried to satisfy within the FanID platform. Because I think if you can provide the end-to-end ecosystem, because for us, we see that as the opportunity for a sport. What better than to provide a kind of walled garden around your own sport where all your sponsors can access your fans, provide them good experiences, and everyone benefits. So, but it is to see that end-to-end perspective, I think, over the first-party data questionnaire, that would certainly be a central piece of advice that we were given, in fact, are giving.
And that really leads me to my last question for you, Mike, and that is, whenever we talk about new solutions, such as FanID, you look at the decks for them and hear you talk about it. At first glance, it's like, well, why wouldn't everybody want this? If it's assuming that it does what you've said it does, that it would be a great thing to have. But obviously, there are multiple considerations that your potential customers have for this. Cost, of course, being one of them. But what do you see as the biggest challenge out there for you in terms of persuading rights holders that this is a solution that they need and should make an investment in or a commitment to?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Jim. And we say we've had 2.5 years experience in market now, talking to all of our partners, and really trying to think through this exact question, because it's not simple. This is in any event, this is innovation. This is change the way you do things for a kind of different world. And of course, that transformation, anything of that nature, takes time, planning, and involves a lot of thought and some investment. Though what we have learned, well, there's two things to say. I think one is that we are really trying to remove barriers to entry here. For rights holders and for brands, the actual investment cost here isn't significant, because we see this as actually a profit center for rights holders, not a cost center. That's certainly the intention. So, and that's been quite deliberate. We are thankfully in a position, as a scaled, public business, to be able to make these investments off our own back. So we've done a lot of the kind of hard yards that a rights holder would have to do. So that's, I think, the first thing to say. The second thing, though, is that what we have recognized, that this is decisioning around, or the decision, let's say, to make this move involves a number of different stakeholders in rights holder organizations. And I think so, thankfully, where we've got to is we now have kind of groups of people where those stakeholders can align, because, of course, you will have someone responsible for your data platform. You will have someone responsible for your information security. You will have someone responsible for your partnerships with your sponsors. You'll have someone responsible for innovation or, such like. So, and all of those groups will, of course, have a vested interest in that decision. So what's good is that we now kind of know that, and we can help rights holders kind of short circuit that decision-making process. We kind of know that, to some extent, the questions that need to be answered. For example, in around the question of infant security, the diligence we've done ourselves now is almost a product in itself. So we can go to rights holders and say, okay, these are probably the questions in your mind. This is, this is the output of those same considerations that we made, a year, 18 months ago. And of course, we have experts in the team that can help on issues such as that. So it is, you're right, it's not a simple product to buy in a sense. But what we have deliberately done is to make it as simple as possible. So removing barriers around investment costs for sure, and also, understanding the composition of the right sort of side anyway, of people that are required, to understand this, to get comfortable with it, and then to recognize, okay, this is all about potential rather than challenge.
Having been in this space for more years than I like to admit, I'm always appreciative of people and companies that are making investments into solutions that can help all of us, rights holders, brand, all of the folks in between, do our jobs better, see better results, get more value out of this. So I think it's just great that Sportradar is in the space and offering something that new that can really help folks kind of navigate the time of change that we're in. So again, appreciate you, Mike, being with us today and talking to us about FanID and taking us through that. I wish you nothing but the best, and hopefully we'll get to talk again somewhere down the line.
Hope so, Jim. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for your time. Really enjoyed it.
Excellent. And on behalf of Ticket Manager, thank all of you for listening and watching. And please join us again for the next episode in the All Access interview series.